Hoke joins us now. Welcome back to the show, Hoke. How are you, man?
Good, man. What's going on? How was Nashville?
Nashville was good. It was quick. It was good. I think I was in Nashville for 12 hours. 7 hours was sleep, and then I went over, did the show, ate lunch at the pharmacy, and drove back. So nice. LT got more time in Nashville than I did.
Clearly.
My question to start with you is Miles Kelly, because when he made that commitment to come to Auburn, you sort of closed the door. That's the end of the roster. So what is Auburn's roster now moving into the upcoming basketball season?
Yeah, I think they're sitting at 12 scholarship players. Obviously, you can have 13, but that's nothing new for Bruce. That's something he's done pretty much every year. He leaves that last spot open, and maybe he'll add a walk-on or whatever it might be. But yeah, that should do it. I mean, you got Miles Kelly, who that's a really big addition. Not only because he's a good player and he fits a need sort of that at 2 or 3 position, but he gives you a lot of versatility there. Chad Baker-Mazara is a player that played well, but obviously had his inconsistencies in terms of off the court and emotions on the court, and it's something that they got to work on with him. And so Miles Kelly, I think, provides a good balance to that, some competition for Chad at the 3, and he'll also provide some competition for Denver at the 2. So I think his versatility is nice. And then, of course, you got J.P. Pegues at the point guard, who will be your point guard, Jaheim Hudson, who you brought in from SMU, who will compete with Chaney Johnson at the power forward. And then you've got Tahad Pettiford and Ja'Kai Howard coming from high school. So you had 5 guys. And, I mean, that pretty much sets it. I think it's probably the most versatile roster that Bruce has had. Last year was really deep. You had 2 solid, complete lineups, 1 through 5. You had 2 of those. I think this roster is going to be very similar, but I think there's even a little bit more versatility because Denver can play 1 or 2. Miles Kelly could play 2 or 3. Chaney could play 3 or 4. Janai could play 4 or 5. Tahad could play 1 or 2. There's just a lot of guys that could go between 2 positions depending on how rotations want to work. And so it's a talented roster yet again, and there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of options. I think outside of J.P. Pegues at the 1 and Janai starting at the 5, there's a bunch of intrigue this offseason in terms of position battles, I think, in the middle of that lineup.
Hoke, you kind of answered my question. I was going to ask you what that starting 5 and bench rotations would look like, but I'm going to pivot a little bit to this is going to be the most experienced roster, possibly in college basketball, and a super old roster with 10 returning seniors. How does it translate on the court to make sure that there's success with the tools that you have that's up to Bruce Pearl's standard and the Auburn standard?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, a couple of years ago, they had the youngest team in the college basketball, and now here they are, and they're going to have one of the oldest teams in college basketball. I mean, a bunch of experience. I mean, Dylan and Chris have been around forever. Janai's numbers when he finishes his career, his college numbers, are going to be some of the most impressive numbers in the history of college basketball. I'm not even kidding. In terms of the total points, the total rebounds, the total blocks, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I remember seeing it a few weeks ago. But he is going to be one of a handful of college players ever to have a certain grouping of points, rebounds, blocks, even some assists in there. I mean, his numbers are going to be crazy just because he's going to play for so long. But yeah, I mean, there's just guys. Denver Jones has played a ton of basketball. Pegues has played a ton of basketball. There's just going to be a lot of experience. I think they're looking at maybe 10 seniors. There's a couple of guys that could play another year because of COVID, like Jaheim Hudson. This will be his 4th year, but he could play another year. Miles Kelly could play another year. Although I don't expect Miles Kelly to be there 2 years, but yeah, it's going to be a crazy experienced team. And I'm interested to see sort of how that translates, because one of the things that I think at times the way Auburn plays, they get up and down so much. And so if they can sort of add the experience element, like last year against Yale, if they could have had a little bit more composure down the stretch and a little bit more experience and made some smarter plays, I think they win that game. Like they just threw that game away. So I think the experience is going to be massive. The SEC's loaded, right? We thought it was loaded this year. It's going to be even more so this coming year. So that experience should pay dividends. Now, looking ahead, it's going to create a crazy offseason next year. I mean, the roster turnover next year for Auburn is going to be nuts. But I think it's a situation where the staff looked at it and said, we'll deal with that on the other side. we got an opportunity to bring back Janai, bring back Dylan, add a couple of pieces, and make another run for a championship. Let's do it, and we'll deal with the next season turnover because there's going to be a lot of it next year. We'll deal with that next year, but you can't pass up an opportunity to make a run. And if that means bringing back Dylan, Janai, Chris, all these guys, then that's what you got to do to try to win a championship.
We talked about the additions and Jaheim Hudson, Miles Kelly, and JP, and they did plug some holes. But to you, in your opinion, what is still the biggest need for Auburn going into the season?
Ooh, well, I think, man, I would say sort of figuring out the backup point guard situation. Although I think they feel really comfortable with Denver Jones a couple rotations a game. Like, I think JP Pegues is going to be your guy. I think probably by the time SEC play goes, he's going to be a guy that's going to be playing 24 minutes a game or maybe more. I think it's figuring out what do the rotations behind him look like when it comes to SEC play. Can you get 2 rotations from Denver and maybe one from Tahad or something, and that's all you need? So I think that'll be interesting to sort of see how that plays out. But I think they're really comfortable with letting Denver have the ball in his hands some during the game and play some point. So that'll be sort of interesting to see maybe how that develops. The 3 positions really interesting, like in terms of how that develops. You got Miles Kelly is going to be in there, Chad Baker-Mazzaro. You bring back Chris Moore, who, while no, is he the most talented? No, but there's nothing he doesn't know about what to do on both ends of the floor. And then you've got Jakai Howard, who's an unbelievably athletic freshman coming in. And then you got Chaney even maybe getting some minutes there. So that small forward wing combo guard position is going to be crowded. So that's going to be interesting to watch as well. But they don't need anything roster-wise. Like, they've got the pieces to make another run as deep as they want to go. I think they've got every piece you need to win a championship in the SEC, to make the Final Four. They've got point guard play. They're going to have pretty good shooting. They're going to have length. They're going to have rebounding. You got an All-American center. You've got all the pieces. It's just a matter of fitting them all together, and I think figuring out sort of that backup point guard position, and when Denver goes there, okay, who's playing too, and sort of how it all works together. But the pieces are there, in my opinion.
Okay, Alabama announced yesterday Purdue is official. We'd heard that for a while, that Alabama and Purdue, the date was going to be set in that return game from them playing last year. And there's been some scheduling nuggets dropped from Alabama, but there's been a lot of intrigue about Auburn's schedule improving difficult-wise in the non-conference play. Is that a true statement? Have you heard some rumblings of some games coming up? And then I want to ask you about the ACC Challenge. Any thoughts on who Auburn may get in that challenge? Because a lot of people are trying to pair up Alabama and Auburn with some of the elite teams in that ACC SEC Challenge. Talk schedule with me a little bit.
Well, yeah, so we talked to Bruce, I guess, last Monday at his golf tournament, the Children's Harbor Golf Tournament. And he straight up said it's going to be the toughest non-conference schedule they've had under him in his tenure. I think probably the toughest one was the Final Four year. They played Washington that year. They went to NC State that year. They played UAB on a neutral floor. And then, of course, they played Maui. They played Xavier, Arizona, and Duke and Maui. So that was a pretty good one. I think this one's shaping up. They're already playing in Maui. So, like, you've got a pretty good chance of playing either North Carolina or UConn, at least one of those among your 3 games out there. And there's some other good teams, Michigan State, Memphis, and some others. So you got that tournament.
Yeah, you just say Maui, and you know you've got a couple of good games in Maui, right?
For sure. You got 3 games guaranteed, and UConn and North Carolina are out there. You got to think one of them is going to be against one of those, right? So you got Maui. I wrote last Monday when I wrote Bruce's comments, I told our subscribers at Auburn Live that I've heard that they are trying to schedule Purdue as well in Birmingham. I think that's something that could happen. I know that they are trying to schedule Houston in Houston, the Toyota Center, not at Houston. It'd be like where the Rockets play. Not done. Don't know if it'll get done, but I know they're trying to make that happen. And then you've got the Hoops Giving game in Atlanta that they've played in the past few years. They're going to play in that game. Who they're going to play, I'm not sure yet. I originally wrote and heard that NC State, but I think NC State may have backed out. I've heard another team that's going to take their place potentially, but that's not done yet. But could be a. I mean, the team that they could play there, I've seen pop up on some preseason top 25s. So you got those 3, and then you've got the ACC SEC Challenge, which will be interesting. I'd heard rumblings that Auburn was going to push to try to get Duke there. I don't think that's going to happen. I've heard Clemson. I've heard Miami. I've heard maybe NC State, but NC State, I don't know. Since they kind of backed out of Atlanta, I'm not sure if that'll happen in the challenge. But I think Clemson and Miami are potentials there. I'd be curious to see where those games are. I think Miami and Clemson both went on the road last year, so it could be a road game for Auburn. But yeah, I mean, between Maui and if you can land Purdue and Birmingham, and you can get Houston potentially settled, and then you toss in the challenge, and then you toss in the hoops giving game. Yeah, it'll be a really, really challenging non-conference schedule, and it'll be an Auburn team that I think is capable of being competitive and with that schedule and winning some games.
Justin Hokanson, Auburn Live. He's got the Auburn Live show. You see that promoted right over his shoulder there. You can get everything on 3 Sports Auburn Live with Justin Hokanson there. One more question before you go, Hoke, on the JohnsonRVCenter.com hotline. As the SEC meetings continue in Destin, is there one storyline from an Auburn perspective you're watching down there, or is it just the big topics that everyone's talking about, the NILs, the collectives, and the settlement coming out of Congress?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The Destin meetings is kind of not something I get super interested in. The NIL stuff is interesting only because of sort of how Freeze has gone about that. And so, hearing maybe Sankey talk about trying to slow down on getting a cap for teams and things like that, that's probably the thing that most interests me, because I think Hugh Freeze is very I think he is very much like, he does not want to keep being a fundraiser. And so I just sort of watch the NIL landscape and wonder when it's going to change, because I think Hugh Freeze is counting the days on when, the collective comes in house, or when it becomes a revenue sharing thing for the players and he doesn't have to go fundraise. He does not want to do that. He doesn't like it. And so that's probably from an Auburn perspective what I watch. And if I were an Auburn fan, I would just pay attention to the NIL and when you can maybe have to do less fundraising and when maybe more of it's brought in-house. Because I think Freeze he wants players to be paid. I think a lot of these coaches understand that. They appreciate the market, and they want the player to get something for obviously what they're worth. But they do not like the fundraising, especially, Freeze. He does not want to go out there and fundraise. So the sooner he can stop doing that, and stop begging for money and every offseason go into these boosters and going, all right, guys, I need X amount of millions of dollars to figure out the roster. That is not what they want to be doing. So the quicker that is phased out and you have a little bit more set way of these players getting paid, I think the better for specifically Hugh Freeze, because that's going to wear those guys down. Another year of it, okay, but man, I mean, somebody like Freeze, if you told him he had to do what he's doing now for 5 more years and before anything would change, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he'd say to that. I don't think he'd be really thrilled with that. So I just sort of watch it from that perspective.
Need a light at the end of the tunnel for sure. Justin Hokanson,
yes.
Auburn Live on 3 Sports. Go follow, like, and subscribe, all their stuff there. Hoke, a friend of the show. We always appreciate it, man. Have a good day. It was good catching up roster-wise with Auburn basketball.
All right. See you guys. Thanks, man.